As I'm getting ready to film this video, I kind of looked to my right and saw all my Elm Street posters on my wall. It got me thinking back to the first day I got into horror. It all started with Freddy Krueger. It's symbolic that he's become my favorite character in all of horror because he's my roots. It's really where I got hooked on horror. We're going to talk more about that in this ranking, but I just wanted you to know that, yes, I am a really big fan, so some of the things I may bring up in my rankings with these films is going to get a little nerdy. I just want you guys to understand the way my brain works and the reasons why I love these films. So without further ado, guys, sit back, relax, and let's talk about my favorite franchise on the planet, A Nightmare on Elm Street. That remake craze came in like a wrecking ball in the 2000s. There's no denying that. And Freddy was not going to be excluded. Do I hate this remake? That's probably a strong word to use. Quite frankly, there is one character in this film that I think did pretty damn good. That's Freddy himself, played by Jackie Earle Haley. Now I'll admit there is part of me that says to myself, Robert is Freddy and that's it. But it's just not the truth. There are some talented people out there that can do it. The problem with this movie to me is really quite simple. It's one thing when you really like your supporting characters in a film. Hell, that's a really good thing. But the biggest issue is when you like your supporting characters more than your lead, we might have a problem. I know this movie's about sleeping and dreaming, but the bottom line is Nancy must sleptwalk this entire film. You know, the fact of the matter is, even though this is number 8 on the list, I can't help but smile whenever I think about Freddy vs. Jason. I just have a good time with this film. Mostly the third act. And as it made it, this film always feel more like a Nightmare movie than a Friday the 13th movie. I'll be honest with you, I could kind of sit here and let you guys know about how I don't like some of the acting in this film, how I don't like some of the characters in this film, how I don't like that Freddy only really gets one kill in this film. But I'm just going to sum it up really simply. The bottom line is, Kane Hodder should have done this movie. The fact that we didn't get the Jason against the Freddy really just breaks my heart. Ronnie Yu, New Line, Rob Shea, whoever's responsible, you should be ashamed of yourself. The fans kept these series successful, and without us, you wouldn't have gotten the success of this movie to begin with. So shame on you. No offense to you, Ken Kersinger. I'm not saying you did a bad job, but let's be honest. Kane Hodder brought a lot of life to that character of Jason Voorhees. And, well, this movie kind of put it back to sleep. I almost feel like some of you are surprised to see the Dream Child lore on my list like this. Let's be real, I love this movie, but it's not the best. If you ask me, I think it really just boils down to New Line Cinema and Bob Shea at the time. Because the filmmakers that did this did a really great job. Quite frankly, I really like the characters. I remember their names. I remember some of the great Freddy kills. The problem is, this movie is just rushed. Not only that, let's be real, the storyline for this movie was passed a few years prior to go with the Dream Warriors, so picking up the sloppy seconds from before wasn't going to bode too well with storyline issues. I still can't say I completely understand the way this movie actually works, but it is what it is. No disrespect to the director, he did a great job with the extremely limited amount of time he had. Dream Child's fun, I have a great time with it. The soundtrack is absolutely amazing. Unfortunately, none of those songs are really in the movie. When I did this rating for this movie not too long ago, I made mention that a whole number point would go up if you were able to see the uncut version, and I still feel that way. The gore in this movie is disgusting, especially the dinner scene with Greta. So if you can see this movie uncut on Laserdisc or VHS, please, trust me, go out of your way to see it. Freddys Dead. It's arguably the most divisive in the entire franchise, and it's not hard to understand why. This is a big far cry from where we started back in 1984. Mind you, this is 1991, so we're not very far removed from that time. Seeing this movie all these years later, I really have one major complaint with it. It's not necessarily the tone of the movie. I can understand it's a silly, quirky, slapstick comedy. That's fine with me. But why was the whole movie not in 3D? That's really become my biggest sticking point over the years. I think a lot of the perception would be different if this whole movie was under the guise of 3D, because then the movie would be set up to be nothing but gags and fun jokes, through the lens of a camera. I think the average person is going to be less hard on a movie through the guise of 3D. And let's be honest, seeing Freddy in 3D for an entire movie just seems like a no-brainer for a fun horror entry. It's really a shame that they didn't do it. Well, coincidentally, it looks like Freddy wasn't really dead, as this is the next entry in the series, as well as the next one on this ranking. Luckily, Wes Craven came in with a good pitch with New Nightmare. Now, I gotta be honest, this is the one that I started out pretty low on my list when I first started watching these movies. But I actually think that Wes Craven's New Nightmare has some of the best visuals in the whole franchise. Hell, just look at this picture from the movie. Now, the only reason I don't think that this movie made a whole lot of money at the box office was simply fatigue. 1991 was when Freddys Dead came out, and 94 was Wes Craven's New Nightmare. That's not a whole lot of time to miss something in the world of movies. You've probably noticed on these rankings, I'm really only talking about the few things I don't like. Because quite frankly, if I told you about all the things I liked, we'd be here all day. Really, the only thing about this movie that really bums me out is you've got Robert Englund playing himself in this movie, and we weren't able to have a scene with the two of these guys together. I can only imagine what it would have been like in my head. Man, when I think about the Dream Master, I just can't help but smile. This is the entry that I think about initially when Nightmare on Elm Street comes to mind. Energetic, fun, like Robert called it, the MTV Nightmare. This movie is a special effects extravaganza, and it's one of my all-time favorite special effects movies, bar none. Coming off the huge success of the Dream Warriors, the Dream Master had a lot to live up to, and in my mind, it absolutely does it. Moving the story forward with new characters was important, but knowing that a lot of them were going to be killed off, we had to like our lead. And I am very proud to say that I am definitely an Alice guy. She's one of my favorite characters. I feel Tuesday gets a little bit of a bad rap that's unfair. Quite frankly, I think she's really talented. She's the one that sings that song Running from This Nightmare in the beginning of the film that really sets the tone for the movie. And that's all her, so I give her total credit. The rest of the cast of this movie, I love. Favorites like Kincaid and Joey are back, even if they're not in the movie for too terribly long. Their scenes are still memorable, and you love seeing them in the film. Again, one of the best soundtracks in the entire world of horror. I urge you to check it out. But Robert still steals the show for me in this one. Perfect sense of humor, but still has that creepy, snarling look. Man, the Dream Master has really grown on me over the years. It still kind of feels weird putting this at number 3, but the fact of the matter is, it's probably one of my favorite movies on the planet. The rest of these are as well, so I guess I can't feel too bad. But the original Elm Street, I mean, what else is there really for me to say that hasn't already been said? It's one of the greatest horror movies ever, and I love it so much. Wes Craven's directing, Robert Englund as Freddy is amazing in this film, and the soundtrack. Man, oh man, the soundtrack I still feel is underrated in terms of what these films have to offer. The first time I watched this movie, I was absolutely petrified by this dude, as was the rest of the country probably. But man, this is where it all started. I don't know that I've ever said who my quote-unquote favorite final girl is, but I guess by default it's gotta be Nancy. I mean, she is in what I think is probably the best horror movie of the 1980s. I think the trajectory of horror would have been so much different had Nightmare on Elm Street not come out in 1984. You think about how the slasher craze was dying down by that point? What if Freddy wasn't there to pick up the ball and run with it? Thankfully, we'll never have to question what that would have been like. Now, it's been said that The Dream Warriors is the blueprint on how to make a great horror sequel, and I totally agree. I can sum up this movie in 3 words as to why it's number 2 on my list. Bigger, badder, better. Chuck Russell would show that he knows how to make a damn movie with The Dream Warriors, and every scene in this movie has something to offer. I think that the blend for Freddy was really good in this movie. Sure, he's pretty funny and has some great lines, but look at his face while delivering him. This is not a happy person. Freddy is still as sadistic and as evil as ever, and this movie pushes the boundaries in more ways than one. One of the big reasons why this movie is above number one on my ranking is Nancy. My favorite performance she's ever done as the character is, in fact, in this movie. It just works. She's got the experience. You can see the pain in her eyes, and she's trying to help these kids. Man, this is just an amazing sequel. By part two, Freddy had already broke his own rules coming into the real world. And I'm not talking about the MTV real world. But even though the rules were broken, I think that's what makes this film so scary. The rules mean nothing in Freddy's Revenge. Now, by today's day and age, everybody knows the story about Mark Patton, his sexuality, and the undertones that this movie has. And I still stand by the fact that I think all of that makes this movie even scarier. A man struggling with his own sexuality while being taunted and haunted by a demon. The devil himself, even. It's by no coincidence this was the first Elm Street film I ever saw. What if I wouldn't have loved the first one that I saw? Would I be making this video today? Thankfully, I don't have to worry about that. Freddy's Revenge absolutely terrified me and still has that effect on me to this day. Now, you could argue that part 2 isn't the most well-made and doesn't have the glossiest production, but sometimes it's that X factor in the movie that gets in and makes it what it is. Freddy's Revenge to me is definitely a movie that has that weird X factor that almost can't be explained. To me, Freddy's Revenge is almost like New Nightmare in a sense. I feel like this Freddy was not the Freddy that you see in the rest of the movies, but a more evil, sadistic entity that decided to try to break out and escape and cause hell in the real world. Mark Patton's performance is something that I just can't get over. Every time I watch it, I'm enthralled with his visuals, his eyes, and just his sheer terror. The guy did an amazing job in this movie. When Mark Patton is in Grady's bedroom and Freddy starts to burst out of him, it is the absolute highlight of the entire series to me. Talk about sheer terror. Seeing this for the first time was one of the most exhilarating experiences I ever had. It shocked me. Moments like this are what make Nightmare Part 2 my absolute favorite in the entire series. There's a dark layer, a dark shade of gray, that was never met ever again in my opinion, and Part 2 will live on to be one of the scariest movies I've ever watched. Well, that's it, guys. My Nightmare on Elm Street franchise ranking. I've done some before in the past, but getting done with this video, I can honestly say I left it all on the table. This is my favorite horror franchise on the planet, and for good reason. Nightmare on Elm Street will live on forever in the hearts of many, and Freddy Krueger will be a staple character from now to eternity. I love these movies. They're a big part of my heart, and I really appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this video. We'll see you guys very, very soon.